everyone. Welcome back to another Expert Exchange. This is our first Expert Exchange since we took a break in September. And I'm really excited to be here with you guys. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. This is Expert Exchange, where we address real questions with expert answers. My name is Morgan Taylor. I'm the editor of Abode at HAA, and I am your moderator today with our host, Gina Irwin of GWR Management. Today is Wednesday, October 14th, and today's topic is on recruiting strategies for hiring great on-site employees during a pandemic. Before we turn it over to our host, I'm going to review some housekeeping items. Thank you again for joining us today. Obviously, you all know this or you wouldn't be here, but for those who are watching later, just as a reminder, Expert Exchange is now on Wednesdays. Every Wednesday, or excuse me, the second and fourth Wednesday of each month. For our viewers today, please ask any questions that you may have as the session goes on in the Zoom chat box or on the comments via Facebook Live. Once we get through the questions that we curated, we will get to your questions. This is a micro webinar, so we're going to try to keep it to our 30-minute time window. And again, Gina will be our host today, but today is the last day that she will be the host of Expert Exchange. Starting next session, we will have Betsy Marshall with Allied Orion Group moving forward, and I'm just as excited to have her on. A quick disclaimer, we are not public health experts nor attorneys. This webinar is provided for general information purposes only and does not constitute legal or professional advice. No HAA member should act on the basis of any material contained in the webinar without obtaining proper legal or professional advice specific to their situation. Please consult with your management company or property owner to address specific issues and to form your own company guidelines. With that, I will turn it over to our host, Gina Irwin.
Thank you so much, Morgan. I appreciate it all, as always. Welcome, everyone. My name is Gina Irwin. I am with GWR Management. I'm happy to be your host today. We're talking about recruiting strategies to find great employees for all of our properties. We have with us today Matthew Smith from the Liberty Group. Welcome, Matthew. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. I'm going to read your bio because it's far too much for me to memorize, so bear with me. Matthew is the COO and Executive Vice President with the Liberty Group. He has over 20 years of recruiting and human resource experience, with the last 11 being focused in the multifamily industry. He has a strong working knowledge of recruiting management, human resources, training, and development, including human resource processes and employment law. Matthew has worked for 2 global staffing firms, as well as one of the country's largest professional employer organizations, where he worked with clients to develop recruiting programs on a national scale. You can email Matthew at matthews@thelibertygroup.com. You can also learn about the Liberty Group at www.thelibertygroup.com. Matthew, again, thank you so much for joining us.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, this is a great topic. Let's get right to it. Let's get to the million-dollar question. Where on earth do we find quality people?
That's the question I'm asked probably more often than not. No simple answer to that, unfortunately, but a broad answer is that great people are everywhere right now. They really are. They're out there. We have to stop and pause and really make a commitment to look for them, though. I also encourage our clients to take the blinders off at times where we tend to put people in a box and think that we need a specific type of candidate or we're looking for an exact. Open that up a bit. Really look, at a broader scale of candidate. Did you have a great experience at a restaurant? Probably not right now with dining not being an option in some places. But did you get great service at a retail shop? Any of those things are good locations. The obvious ZipRecruiter, Indeed, Craigslist are all necessary, and they're great avenues to find people, but you really have to work at it. You can't just do a one and done. I can't just post a job, hope that it's going to, give me a gold mine in return and not return back to it. It's a process that you really have to maintain and move forward. My personal favorite tool, though, is references. I like to use my network and people who know other good people. 9 times out of 10, someone's not going to refer you a person that they believe is going to be a bad candidate, especially if you're connected with them. They're going to help you find a fit that's right for you. So references is a huge piece that I see people not use on a consistent basis.
Okay, those are great ideas. Thank you for that. And so we're in a different world now. We're shifting. It used to be that you could meet someone in person, you get a feel for their body language, you can actually see how they look from head to toe, and we're shifting. So and some of us have been thrown into this kind of very unprepared. How do we shift from that in-person, get a feel for someone, see their soft skills, body language, those types of things, to virtual recruiting where you're literally looking at someone from here to here and you have no idea what their body language is or things like that? How do you make that shift?
Yeah, it's a tough shift, and I would love to say it's seamless, but it's really not. Behind the scenes, we were doing a lot of beta testing on different software systems, different tools that are available today more so than ever. But before launching, you really have to find the breaking point. You've got to identify what the breaking point of any system is that you're going to go to. Secondarily, you've got to prepare your team. Little things as, do your employees actually have internet at home? As surprising as it may be, there are a lot of people who still don't. Kind of baffling to me, but it's a reality. You also have to really find and define the new process. How are you going to do this? What are the responsibilities? What are the expectations? How do you use these systems before you ever launch it? Because if you go down the path of just initiating or dumping a new software where your team's not familiar, or they don't have a real understanding of what the expectations or the outcomes need to be, it's not going to work. So in addition to really finding that flow between the software piece, you also have to build out the process that identifies a day in the life of what it's going to look like remotely versus in office.
Okay, that's helpful. Those are great suggestions. Can you give me one or two, if you can think of them, some examples of successful recruitments using this kind of virtual avenue?
Sure. We've kind of expanded, fortunately, over the years. So we've been doing this virtual piece a little bit, not to the level that we've done now. But our biggest success, I feel like, came when things really went into lockdown mode. We had a defined list of questions that we really tried, and basically I brought in all questions from branches from Boston to Seattle and said, okay, what are we seeing working? What are we getting the best response from candidates on that really is opening them up and letting them talk to us more? So we built out a set of questions to really identify the skill sets that we were looking for. Now, we adjust them continuously because what works today isn't always going to work tomorrow. But we have had a lot of success with that. I've also talked to 2 or 3 clients now who've done the same thing. They are still heavily remote, but they've really talked about finding those key questions that let them get to know the candidate much better, faster, to determine whether or not this interview needs to continue or if there's a shorter stopping point with it.
I like the way you put that.
A casual disengagement.
Yeah, I really like the way you put that instead of, we're not hiring this person.
Right.
So how do you make a Zoom interview successful? How do you pick up the things like I was talking about a minute ago that you can't necessarily get in person? How do you make it successful?
I think you can still get some of those things. You can look for engagement. You can look for body language. The biggest part of all of this is what expectation is set before the interview even starts. Is the person telling the candidate, hey, it's an interview like any other. I need you dressed for it. I need you prepared for it. Here's what my expectations of this call are going to be. And I would ask in return, what are your expectations for this call? Because if you have polar opposite, things that want to be accomplished, what's the point of even engaging in this interview? If you set clear expectations and you really have a plan that this person knows up front and comes into the interview with, you tend to have a better interview. I would recommend practicing Zoom interviews and watching for key components. And you can have a bad interview type candidate set up. You can have a good interview, and you can really play that balance. But look for the engagement. Look for the interaction. Are they just sitting there, like Frankenstein behind you, not doing anything, and just kind of participating? If it's just yes, no answers and no real engagement, that's pretty telling. Up front, break down the barriers and make sure they're comfortable in the setting that they're in, so they'll relax a little bit and be open with you.
Okay, you said something that I want to pick up on a little bit because it's interesting to me. So those of us that have been doing this for 30 plus years, not that Morgan has by any stretch, but I would never dream to say to someone before an in-person interview, make sure that you're dressed appropriately, make sure that you present well, because as a potential employer, you want to see how they're going to show up, because I think that speaks to character. So you're saying in a Zoom setting, to make people more comfortable because it's kind of awkward, we should do that more.
Most definitely. Make sure that they know, be in a setting that is quiet, that you can really run in. I mean, you'd be amazed at some of the things that pop up on the Zooms and the career fairs that we do. Like blow your mind amazed. But I think setting that tone, as sad as it may sound for all of us who have done this for a long time, I think you have to do that with in-person interviews now as well. There are a lot of people who don't know how to interview, who aren't prepared to interview, because it's something that is dynamic to each group. So I think you have to set the tone for that.
Okay, I think that's an interesting perspective. Because the old rule used to be, they're never going to look as good as they do or present as well as they do during the interview. That's the best you're going to get. So I think maybe if you're coaching them more, then maybe you set the expectation from the beginning instead of, waiting to see what they do with it. So, I think that's a great point. That's super helpful. So any other ideas? You did touch on this a little bit. Any other thoughts about how to get a sense for an applicant over a Zoom? It's clearly not the same as in person. It's not possible. But how do you read people? And I'm probably more talking about interpersonal skills than I am language, because everybody can talk and speak. But how do you really get a sense for an applicant over a Zoom call?
I think you need to ask more specifics. Not closed-ended questions, but open-ended questions that talk about real events that they have accomplished. What's your closing ratio? What's the hardest maintenance day you ever had and why? How did you handle it? What did you do? Asking real defined questions that make them tell you specifics, not just, hey, can you change out an AC unit? Yep, I can do that. Ask specifics. Hardest leasing property. What was the obstacles that you had? How did you guys overcome it? These things that if they can't answer those, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to be a good candidate. So if you can really define those questions, I think you have obviously a much better interview at that point, because you're getting real life answers of what they've accomplished.
Great suggestions. That's super helpful. Okay, so let's shift. You do this interview virtually, and then how do you determine during that process if the person that you're interviewing virtually is actually going to be a fit in person? Because you lose that. They don't come into your office. They don't see the property. They don't meet the staff. You don't have that interaction. How do you deal with that over a virtual interview?
Yeah, well, I think we can all agree we've had perfect interviews in the past that 30 days after starting have not been at all what we interviewed, or even on day one in some cases. I think what happens today in Zoom or virtual interviews, we don't follow the same steps, meaning we don't then let them interview with the team or interview with another person and get a second set of eyes. Why aren't we letting them engage with the staff to hear more about the property, the issues, get a better understanding of who they're going to report to, what the expectations are? I think it's a huge frustration for the teams to make a bad hire as much as it is a manager, because they're impacted equally, because now the work is shifting back on them.
So would you suggest then maybe as a first step, do an interview. And then before you do a final hire for the on-site folks, for them to maybe, bring the person in. I mean, they're going to have to work there. Eventually, they got to come in.
No, absolutely. I think it's a typical process that most people have of meeting the staff and really hearing a day in the life. But for some reason, a lot of companies have cut that piece off right now. And I don't understand why. Why wouldn't you have that second layer that has always existed? Yes, it's going to be virtual, but the second round may pull out some information that you didn't gather, and expose either some more questions that you need to dig a little bit deeper on, or the team may go, wow, they fit in perfectly. They can accomplish the three things that we're really shorthanded to do right now.
That's great. That makes sense. So probably the takeaway is, let's not just make it solely virtual. If they're going to work on site, they got to be on site. I mean, they're going to have to show up every day and serve the public and be a part of the team.
Absolutely. And don't feel the need to cut the interview short. I think a lot of people do the Zoom interview and they feel like there needs to be a shorter time limit to it. Really make it a detailed interview. And once again, this comes back to preparation. If you tell the person this is going to take, an hour, be prepared for at least an hour. You may end short, you may not, but don't cut it short and feel the need, because I think a lot of people feel the virtual has to cut off faster than what a traditional interview does.
Okay, you just prompted me for another question that's not on my list, so I'm asking. I'm intrigued. So would it be a bad idea because we're talking about the rest of the staff and the engagement that you lose with the other people in the office, would it feel like a prospect is being ganged up against if you had the whole team kind of at least make an introduction? This is my assistant, here's my leasing folks, my maintenance manager, say hello, and just make quick introductions? Or would that feel too ganged up against for an applicant?
No, I think it's great. I mean, you would typically do that in an in-person interview as they come in and, they see everyone and, you would make that introduction. I think it's better to let them interview secondarily with the team, because sometimes they'll ask questions they may not ask you. And sometimes your team may say things that are true real life things that are happening on the property that may either convince the person that this is the place for me or it's not the place for me.
Okay, that makes sense. That's helpful. Okay, back to my list of questions. So there is a very high demand right now for maintenance techs and maintenance positions, and they're very, very tricky to fill, I'm sure, as you know, especially when you've got a manager interviewing maintenance, and that's not the same skill level there, obviously. Can you give us just a list of the top few questions that you ask for maintenance folks, and what questions you ask to sort of assess their skills?
Sure. I think we all have the basic list, right? There's that starting point based on what position they're applying for, be it a porter, make ready, lead, maintenance tech, certified, whatever it may be. I think honestly, for the site level people, they need to define more what that person really is going to be doing day to day. The questions need to revolve around the specifics of their job as it sits when they take it, not on the job description that may have been written 5 years ago when the property opened. They really need to know what they're coming into, because you can hire a certified maintenance tech who's phenomenal, who can work on everything and anything. But if your AC units are on the roof and they don't want to climb on the roof, well, you've got a qualified candidate, but they're not a right fit for the job. So I think, to be just, not trying to give you a list of answers, I think the best response is every property needs to develop that list based on what their needs are for this position, for the hire they're making. I would encourage them to bring the team in and ask, be honest, where are we falling short? What do we need the most coverage on? Where are we lacking? Where do we have the least amount of depth? Because that's what you're going to interview to, and that's the position and the questions that you need to decide on based on really where the property is today.
Okay, that's a great answer. That's super helpful. Things that I probably wouldn't have thought of. What tips can you give us about attracting really great employees, like right now? I mean, once you get someone in front of you, you can sell your company, but are there things that we can do to put out there that helps attract people, whether it's employee perks or whatever that might be?
Yeah, I think all of, the standard answer is money, obviously, huge motivator for everyone. Benefits and perks have really become a high secondary piece where I've seen some people in cases. I've got a family member who works for Apple and took a lesser position because the benefits on the back end were so much above and beyond anything else that they were receiving prior. He actually took a pay cut because of all the additional perks that came with working for Apple. So I think it is a hot button. I think benefits, health insurance has gotten more expensive for all of us. Being able to sell that, I think people want to work for a company where they feel valued, where they also feel like they are they're having a contribution and they're acknowledged for that contribution. Regardless of how much money you pay or what the perks are, if someone's not happy, they're not going to stay. If they don't feel valued or if they don't feel like what they're doing is making things better, they're going to move on. So I think most importantly is being able to share the story of not only the company, but the property and the team of what you do to make that candidate feel valued. And honestly, I think it's probably going to be the bigger piece coming out of this COVID thing, because there's going to be a lot of shell shock and people hesitant to make a move for fear of the unknown. And so I think that there's going to be a lot of people who want to potentially make a move, but end up staying put just because they know the devil they're with and they're afraid to make that transition.
That's helpful. Thank you. I appreciate that. A couple more questions, and these are good ones. So, and then I'm going to turn it over to Morgan, see if there's anything that's come in the chat or Q&A. In the interim, when there's open positions and you want to take the time to find the right person, does it make sense? And can you kind of talk us through, this is funny, I'm asking the Liberty Group. I mean, right. Of course, we want to use temps. Yeah. But how does that work? Give us the options of using temps or contract labor in the meantime, or if you want to try someone on for size. I mean, can you walk us through kind of those scenarios? Yeah,
it's a great option. And if you look at numbers nationally, they don't lie. The two largest staffing firms last year combined to do $50 billion in sales. So that means people are using temporary staff. From 2009 to current, temporary hours have increased 4 times faster than traditional payroll hours, okay? So 2 facets with that. One, the immediate need. I've got someone going out on leave. We just have so much work, we can't cover it. Obviously a great way to use temporary staff, because if you spread your team too thin, they're gonna be really upset with you, and you've got disgruntled employees who can't keep up and are unhappy with their job. The secondary part that you brought up, the temp to hire piece of, hey, we don't really know what we want potentially. We know we've got a need, but I'm not sure exactly where that fit comes into play. Great, let's look at some candidates. Let's interview as we go. And I kind of phrase it as a working interview. Really see what this person can do. How do they operate the first of the month, the middle of the month, the end of the month? How do they operate when work orders are heavy? Don't just give it a week, really give it time to see how do they operate on your property with all different things going on. I tell clients all the time, throw the kitchen sink at them. Make them do everything that they claim they're qualified to do to really see where that bandwidth is, and does it provide you what you need on the site level.
Can you speak very quickly before I get to my last question about contract employees? So if a company is, if a management company finds their own candidate and want to use them on a contract basis, or maybe run them through the Liberty Group or another firm, in the interim, just to kind of try them on for size. I mean, is that a fair approach?
Yeah, two kind of different things. Contract is more like a 1099 where they're not insured, and I would always be careful of that. But as they come back through us, we do offer those services. If you find a candidate, we still do all the pre-employment screening, background, references, e-verify, and then you can get them on your property, for as long as you need them until you determine they're a right fit, and then they're yours. It's a great way. I mean, it really is. It gives you time to do your back-end paperwork and not feel the pressure, but it also gives your team a chance to really have someone there. And the piece I always, ask clients, what's the cost of not having this position filled? And what's the strain that it puts on your current staff? And if those are problems, then you've really got long-term problems the longer that position stays open.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great. Last question. And what suggestions do you have, or what ideas or tips can you give us to keep employees motivated. This is probably more so existing employees than necessarily attracting employees in this environment where residents are angry, they're cranky, they're frustrated, as are the rest of us. But, you know, we have a responsibility to, you know, be more stoic and more stable. And how, as an employer, can we keep our employees motivated to stay positive in that environment?
Yeah, this is a tough one, and you know it's been the hardest year of my life, obviously, and Gina, I'm sure you can probably attest to that as well. You know, I think transparency is number one. Letting your team know that you don't have every answer, that some of these are moving targets that we're adjusting for daily, but they also have to believe you have their best interest in mind. You have to build that rapport and trust with them, that they can come to you when they're having a bad day or ask any question and get a truthful answer. You know, as I tell my team, you may ask me a question, I'll give you the God's honest truth every time. You may not like it, but I promise you it's gonna be a truthful response. Additionally, that engagement factor. You know, I've found that I'm doing more contact with my staff than ever before because I want to hear from them. I want to know, you know, who's struggling right now, and why. Is it something we can fix? You know, the statistics of this whole event is, you know, in August, there were more suicides than there were COVID related deaths. And that's horrible. And, you know, you think about the employees that we have nationally, how many of those individuals are struggling behind the scenes that we don't know about? I think for them to feel that this is a safe place and an environment, and they've got to feel like it's a fun place where they can be. How can you put a smile on your staff's face every day? How can you make them feel good and know, hey, I can go to work and it's my escape. I'm going to have a good day. And you know, that's my goal. I want my team to have fun. You know, obviously we have, you know, work to get done, but I want them to be able to be in this environment and be happy and be excited about it, but also know they have full transparency and they can ask anything they want. And find a way to give the support. And the key is really most on that ask is to be able to follow it up, and either find a resolution or explain why the no behind it exists. But it can't just hang out there. You've got to be able to make closure on all contact and conversations that you have with your staff.
Okay, outstanding. Those are really great suggestions, Matthew. And I'm totally intrigued with this conversation, clearly because we've gone a little bit over. But I do want to thank you for answering everything. This has been wonderful dialogue. I want to turn it back over to Morgan quickly, just to see if there's any questions that you can address in the chat or that maybe came over on Facebook.
Yeah, thank you, Gina. And again, to reiterate what Gina just said about you, Matthew, great responses, very helpful information. I don't see any questions at the moment. So if you guys have any, really quickly put them in the comments or in the Zoom chat box. But there are just a few things that you said, Matthew, that I really just wanted to emphasize. I really liked your point about hiring for the current need that you have rather than the kind of general job title that it may usually be in a non-pandemic situation. So I just want to reiterate that. Hire for the need that you currently have. Ask the questions that fit your current needs.
Yeah, you've got to ask the questions that solve your current problems. You know, not the problems that may have existed 2 years ago.
Exactly. And then with the maintenance positions, you made the point of finding the top 3 most critical items that a newly hired maintenance tech must have in order to be really successful at the job. I thought that was great as well. And
if they can have an immediate impact and help your existing team, that makes the onboarding piece even that much smoother.
right. And then the last thing I just wanted to emphasize, you know, the thing with the temp to hire or the contract hires, that can really alleviate a lot of the stress that your current team is feeling. I know that morale is a big topic right now. Morale might be a little bit lower than usual just because there is so much work to be done. There is so much stress, and utilizing a contract employee or a temp to hire employee may alleviate some of that added stress and added responsibilities. So.
Yep, absolutely. You give the teams the tools they need, and you know, have happy people on staff. It's a big win.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Well, those are all the points that I wanted to make, and we don't have any questions, so I'm going to turn it back over to Gina.
Okay, thank you, Morgan. And Matthew, thank you again. This has been a wonderful session. Thank you all for having me host. It's been wonderful. I hope everyone enjoys this one. As Morgan said in the beginning, I'm retiring. And Betsy Marshall is going to be taking over hosting this from now on. I will be tuning in just to make sure she doesn't outshine me, but I'm certain she's going to do an outstanding job. Thank you again, Matthew, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I've very much enjoyed doing this, and I look forward to seeing everybody in person very, very soon.
Same here.
Yes.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Gina. Just a reminder, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. It is called HAA TV. So if you missed today's session, or if you want your friend, your colleague, your coworker to watch this, they can go onto our YouTube, type in HAA TV, and our YouTube channel will come up. Hit that subscribe button. And if you have a suggestion for an upcoming topic, please email me at comm@haaonline.org, and we will try to get that in the lineup. Until then, make it a great day. Thank you again, Matthew, and the Liberty Group. Y'all have a great day.
Bye-bye.